Hi everyone, it's Christopher, Mono County Library Director and co-host of the Oxygen Starved podcast. It's Book Talk Friday, and today I'm back to one of my favorite genres, historical fiction, with two great library reads for you to check out. You know, some of the oldest forms of written storytelling and perhaps historical fiction are those epic Norse sagas that came out of Scandinavia over 1,000 years ago. They chronicled the history and culture not just of the peoples, but of the Norse gods, and remain influential even today, as many contemporary authors, from Neil Gaiman to George R. R. Martin, wrote multi-book series taking inspiration both directly and indirectly from these sagas. Television, of course, has only bolstered their popularity with series like American Gods, The Vikings, and of course Game of Thrones. One of my favorite authors of this genre is Bernard Cornwell, who wrote over a dozen books in this Saxon series, set in 10th century Britain as the Danes, or Vikings from Scandinavia, were conquering the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in what historically became a multi-generational conflict that would ultimately unify these kingdoms into modern-day England and cement Christianity as the religion of the country. As you might expect, there is quite a bit of bloody fighting in these books, as most political struggles that involve Vikings were solved at sword point, and Cornwell excels in propelling that action forward loosely around actual historical events. In fact, his inspiration for this series comes from learning as an adult that he himself is descended from an ancient Saxon leader, Uhtred, who lost his castle to the Danes and fought for the English king. You can actually visit that castle, Bamberg, off the coast of northern England today, and Cornwell uses Uhtred as his protagonist in these books, an old man telling the stories of his youth spent fighting the Danes. The one I'm holding here is called The Empty Throne. There are 13 titles in this series total. They can be read as standalones, but are best enjoyed as a group. And if the story sounds familiar, you may have seen the TV version on Netflix called The Last Kingdom, which adapted a number of the earlier titles. Cornwell's books also lead me to my pick for the new this week, The Ringbreaker by Jean Gill. Gill is an award-winning writer of historical fiction, and this is the first in a new series set in 12th century Orkney. This first installment is a coming-of-age story centered around two teenagers, each of whom is a bit of a square peg in Viking Orkney society. The blurb reads, "In the twilight of the old gods, when the last Vikings rule the seas, two cursed orphans meet on an Orkney beach and their fates collide. Stripped of honor, facing bleak loneliness ahead, Skarfer and Lif forge an unbreakable bond as they come of age in the savage Viking culture of blood debts and vengeance. To be accepted as adults, Skarfer must prove himself a warrior, and Lif must learn to use women's weapons. Can they clear their names and choose their destiny?" It's a great lead-in, right? Worked for me, I picked it up. This is the first time I'm reading Jean Gill, and I must say she lives up to her reputation for weaving in impeccably researched historical tidbits to bring medieval Orkney to life. Today, the islands, of course, are part of Scotland, but in this period, they were still under Norse Viking control. And when I'm done with this book, I'll put it in the library collection where other fans of Neil Gaiman and George R. R. Martin, and of course, Bernard Cornwell can come in and find it. In the meantime, come into the library, grab another Bernard Cornwell to sink into, or another great read. Stay safe and happy reading.